Craig, hi Gianna. It's so great to have
Hello,
you
hello.
here. I'm Beth
Hello, Beth.
White. Hi, I'm Beth White. I'm the founder and CEO of MeBeBot, and we've been hosting roundtable series since the beginning of this year where we're inviting in thought leaders and experts like Gianna and Craig to join us. And we've been, really bringing forward a lot of the hot topics in the industry today, from different ways about AI governance to literacy, strategy, how to calculate ROI on AI. And now today we're going to talk about something that's really important. We're all a little overwhelmed, right? And there's a need to really gain a little bit control over some of the situations that are happening out there with inside our organizations. And so this is all about how to slow down the pace and be able to get control over it. And so, Craig, before we start, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm just going to do a quick little promos for a couple things we have going on with MeBeBot. One that I think is really important, and we'll come back to this slide and do intros in a second, is this week MeBeBot just launched our first ever awards, and it's called the Humanity and AI Awards. And so this came about because we've been watching teams working really hard to implement different levels of AI, from literacy and enablement to human-centric design in their implementations of AI, to really thinking about AI governance and building trust with inside organizations. And so we want to celebrate the teams out there that are doing all this great work. If you and your team are doing some amazing different work in these three categories, please fill out your nomination form today. Amy's dropped the nomination form into the chat, and that will give you guys an opportunity to go to our landing page and actually see the nomination form embedded within it. It takes about 7 minutes to fill out, and we actually have cash prizes. So there's $500 for every winner in each of the three categories. Yet we'll be choosing two finalists in each category and celebrating everyone on a award ceremony, which will be August 6th. And we have actually the LinkedIn event out there as well. Maybe Amy can drop that into the chat as well for when that award ceremony is. But again, the nominations are open now until July 24th. And we are excited to have George LaRoque. He is from WorkTech. He's judged a number of different pitch fests within the HR tech community. We have Felicia Newhouse. She's the founder and CEO of AI Powered Women. So she'll be at Women's Conference too at MIT. So she will be part of the judging group. And then Zoe Walter, who has a lot of learning and education on empowered AI. So three great judges that will be providing their lens to selecting the winners in the three different categories for the first ever Humanity and AI Awards. And so the other event that's coming up soon, we don't have the invite out there yet, but we will be having Deb Ingram. She's been a two-time MeBeBot customer, sit down with us and talk about, what does it take to really layer AI on top of your knowledge content. And Deb has worked within Mozilla and Epicor as customers of MeBeBot, and has really looked as a customer at how she's able to use our technology not to reinvent all her content, but to pull out the best of the content to power it to support employees' experiences within the company she's been part of. So that's going to be an exciting event on Thursday, July 18th. So after this session, we'll also be sharing valuable resources as well, so that you all have some takeaways for some different resources. But without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and allow Craig and Gianna to introduce themselves. So, Craig, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Craig Forman. I am the founder of Culture C Consulting. Prior to that, 6 years, lead people scientist at Culture Amp. My background, organizational psychology, and I think what drives everything I do is just a fascination with people in the workplace. Always has. How do we work? How do we work at our best? And this belief that that both are true. That people, when they enjoy their workplaces, when they feel engaged, inspired, have some agency, organizations win, people win. So my world has been around helping organizations build that environment where people feel seen and heard, but also allowing executives and leadership teams to have solid information to make sense of their people, so they can make data informed decisions in alignment with their people. So that's me in a very small little nutshell.
Yeah, and I know, Craig, you have a wealth of experience and knowledge. We've met many times over the years, and you always bring the ability to build community to the table. That's amazing. So, congrats to that. And Gianna.
Yes, hello. First of all, just huge thank you, Beth, for having Craig and me both. I have so much respect for each of you, and just super thrilled to be a part of this conversation. So I'm Gianna Driver, the Chief People Officer of One Workplace, and I've been in the HR people space for going on 2 decades or so. And I love this. I feel like it's such a beautiful place to be, and to be at this moment in time where there's so much happening in the world, yet at the same time, returning to our roots of being human. And we in HR get to play in this beautiful space and field. So yeah, I can't wait to dive in today.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. I know you guys bring, again, so much knowledge and expertise to the table. And really, what is kind of a fun experience is that I was able to see Gianna and Craig in person in Austin, Texas recently at a conference called Running Remote. And in those interactions, in person, you have a lot of opportunity to discuss what's happening out there. We had a couple different dinners and social engagements where we were able to kind of feel the pulse of what's happening out there. And I think, Craig, when I approached you first and then we brought Gianna into the mix, it was all about, think people are exhausted. When you talk to people about how are they doing, what's their mental health state today, a lot of it is just stressed out, trying to, drink from the fire hose, as they say, and yet, they feel a little bit of a loss of control, right? And so that was where we kind of came up with this theme for today is, what are some methods and ways that people can gain a little bit more control within their ecosystems and environments so that we all can live, healthier lives inside and outside of work, right? Wellness is a big deal, right? And a lot of stress causes us to, get to a place where sometimes you're just mentally shut down, right? Because of the overload. I know one of the first questions that, we were talking about when we were, preparing and thinking about this topic is, you know, I was a history major in college, so I love thinking about the past and what happens in our past does help inform our future. So, both of you, well, let's start with Craig and then go to Gianna, is, think back to a time before AI was the headline like it is today. Are there other disruptions that occurred earlier in your career that actually taught you something about pace and that still holds true today? And where you think you can shed some light to others on how to kind of get a grasp of it, because this isn't like the first time that things have been in a little state of a chaos, as we could say, right? So, Craig, you want to kick things off?
Sure. When we were talking about this, I'm sure if I dug, I could think of lots of scenarios, and most of us in our careers where that happened. But the first one that came to me was COVID, right? And I think that's one that we can all, most people that are listening to this, we all experience that, and in the context of work. So that was so pivotal, and I feel like it was also, looking back, the moment where this sort of change became the norm. That, first there was that, then there was the financial disruptions, and the layoffs began, which have continued. Then we saw, AI on the rise, geopolitical stuff going on. And I think before that, I wouldn't have said that change is necessarily constant. And clearly we all dealt with change. But I think post COVID, the idea that um, what used to be a conversation of every once in a while in difficult times or in a difficult industry, how do we manage that? I feel like everybody in this environment, and that's part of our conversation today, is dealing with so much change happening so fast and with no end in sight. I mean, I believe we're about to, really move into the biggest transformation we've ever seen in the workplace. So that might have just been a little bit of what's to come. So I think, yeah, for me, it was COVID. And, at the time, for me, I was at Culture Amp. We've been doing great work. We were building, this tech company that was booming. and we are launching a community, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. But why that was so interesting was we spent all this time kind of organizing, getting ready, and we just launched that community. It was going to be in person. We found our first 5 chapters, and then COVID hit, and there's so much that stemmed from that, and that we'll probably talk about throughout this, of having to rethink things, not doing things the way we were doing it, taking a breath, retooling so we could go further, right? And and I will say that we very quickly transitioned to a fully virtual model and said, let's just do this virtually, but not try to do it the way we were planning on it. But let's rethink how we're doing this in this new modality. And over the next 2 years, we set up 73 chapters globally, and it turned out to be exactly, I believe, what so many people needed. Me too. I was building for me this connection in the world, staying connected to all the people that were passionate about this work, but also going through such difficult times.
Hmm.
Today, it's like 130 chapters globally. They're running 300 events, so it lived through that. And I think the fact that it came together in trauma when things did settle a bit, it was very solid, and it continues to live on well beyond me. And at the time I said, if I could build something that lasts after I'm done with it, that's the win. So I think that, yeah, COVID for me would be the one of like this massive disruption that really left. Ever since, it just feels like that's the new norm. Be ready for change and disruption.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great example, Craig. I know we all felt that that was a impossible time, but we overcame, right? So,
We are.
and yep, here we are. And Gianna, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, so if I think back to a time before AI was the headline, and something that was really disruptive and something that taught me about change, um, I go back into the before machine or the before times, and I think about smartphones. So, when I was in college, I remember having a flip phone for the first time, and it had this like green screen with like the letters were black, and we were starting to get into texting and stuff. And that was fun and cool. So translation like AI, kind of fun and cool because it can write job descriptions for you and you can ask it questions and it gets to know you better than, Google algorithms might. So some similarities there. But then as I entered the workforce and started to use a BlackBerry, right, for those who might remember and have keys on it that, and constantly being on and needing to respond to emails, I started to feel like, oh, whoa, hold on a second. I don't know that this is actually as cool as I thought. If I want to text my friends, it's nice that I've got this little device that can allow me to do that. And I can send photos and everything now. But, oh, wow, like I've got to be on all the time. I had so much expectations for me around, for myself around, wow, like I need to prove that I'm working and that that I'm fast and quick. And so for me, it was very disruptive. And I started to realize in my community and, here in Silicon Valley in tech, a lot of us were starting to feel that way. The pace of change and the information we needed to ingest and what we needed to respond to exponentially increased. And some of the things I learned during that period of time, I think still hold true today as we think about change and integrating changes into our normal workflows. And a couple of things I jotted down as I was listening to Craig just now are I remember my boss sitting down with us in an all hands meeting and just talking about we're in this together, right? Like we're when I respond to an email at midnight, I don't need all of you to respond back to me, but sort of
Mm,
pace setting and managing expectations.
mm,
Also calling us out and asking, what are your assumptions? So, coming at change from a place of curiosity if you're a leader, as opposed to a place of needing to dictate and orate change and communicate to people, I think is something that we could take away. And that sense that, it wasn't just me alone that was managing all of the pressure I felt to perform and to perform quickly and be on all the time. Feeling a sense of community that, what, like I'm struggling with this and so are you. And let's sort of, have conversations and the stuff that makes us human where we can riff off of each other and share best practices. Those are the things that helped. And now look at all of us. We don't think of having smartphones as disruptive at all. It's just an integrated part of how we live our lives.
yeah, that is a great analogy too, is because that was a very pivotal time. I remember it
Yes.
well as people weren't quite sure how to handle that. And then frankly, even when the laptops started to become prevalent and you could take work home,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there was a day where it was all desktop computers, right?
Mhm.
So now transitioning to where we are today, if you had to describe the current state of what you hear many of your peers and people you meet at these conferences and events, how are they describing the current state of organizations? And maybe just use, a favorite word or two that you like that you think describes where you hear or think people are today and what's happening out there. Gianna, you want to go first?
Mhm. Well, I know I'm supposed to use one word, but I've got all of these little like
That's
catchphrases. I've got
okay.
so many
That's all
different words.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think we're in it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we are in it. We are ensconced. We are in it. There's experimentation. There's transformation. There's
Right.
iteration. There's also some fear because this is
Mm-hmm.
new territory.
Right.
Um, but I do speak with people from all kinds of organizations, tech and non-tech, and a consistent theme is we're in this. We're in it right now, and we're in it
Mm-hmm.
together.
Right. No, I like that you see the unifying and I do hear, the fear and the stress as well, but I think that's powerful to say that people are on it, coming together on this. What about you, Craig? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first, I love what you brought up. It's funny going back to the BlackBerry, but it was a great analogy going far enough back to remember those moments. But also, I think there's something important in that and in COVID and what we're going through now that whenever we're going through disruption, we can always see what we're losing, right? But we can't see what's coming. So, Beth, when you reminded us of like, we don't think about that anymore, there is another side. We are going to change.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that this is probably going to be a little, it's what we're white knuckling it right now. And I think we're going to continue for a while. And I think there's going to be a lot of disruption. And I'm not sugarcoating what's about to happen. But I also think what's going to be on the other side is something we can't quite see yet, a different way of being, a different way of thinking, a different way of working. And just like when all of a sudden we were always on and we were grappling with that, we've adjusted and learned. So I think that's important, which ties into when I thought about this question. And if there's a word, part of this conversation came up, Beth, when we were talking because I had just done here in San Francisco Human Tech Week, and I moderated a panel, and it was all about kind of the nervous system, kind of the human level of dealing with this. But I also realized it's at the organizational level, and that drove me to this word anxiety. I think if there's a word,
Mm-hmm.
I think right now that put my finger on that I think helps all of us if we're really thinking about what's going on, how do we support one another. There just seems to be a state of anxiety kind of at the individual level, so much change, no matter where you are in this journey, which kind of ties back to Gianna, what you said. The one thing that struck me was that how much community you had when you were going through that with the BlackBerry. What
Yeah.
I'm scared of right now is that the world's a bit different and we've been fractured. So finding community is really important. That we need each other in these things, and that like even me, there's days I've been using AI for 3 years now. I think I'm pretty when I look around or ask AI how good I'm doing, I'm far ahead. And then I get into an environment around different people at some conferences, and I feel like I'm not keeping up. I'm not doing enough. And I just wonder, everybody has been doing it on their own by themselves. No one, there's no level set. Where are we? What are we doing? And like, so I think that idea of like coming together and understanding and learning together. I think, but that's that individual sense of anxiety, right? That we don't know where we stand. How am I doing? Am I moving fast enough? Is my job in trouble? What's going on? But I also think when I thought about that and my work, I realized it's a good framework to look at. I think organizations as a system, just like individuals, organizations' nervous systems are also under a lot of stress right now, right? So pressure coming
Mhm.
in from the
Absolutely.
top, saying do this, do this, do this. People inside saying not sure how. How does it all align? What does it mean to my current state? What does it mean to future state? So I think for all of the work and what we're going to discuss today is just to me is a layer of empathy around we are around a lot of systems that are in anxiety mode right now, survival mode,
Mm-hmm.
and just to understand we operate certain ways in that and how do we work through that and how are we collectively helping what Gianna said. I didn't think would strike as hard. How are we finding community and each
Mhm.
other when everything's sort of dividing us? I think
Yeah.
the antidote is coming back together. If it's nothing more than just being around other humans and working through this together, I think no matter where AI goes, we're going to learn what it means and what we get from each other eventually in this journey that we've sort of taken for granted because we've always had it. So
Mhm.
I think community and togetherness is going to combat the anxiety, but we need to find our way into it.
Yeah, and that's a really great segue into what we want to talk about next, which is, how are we going to really start to slow down before we can start to speed up? like what does that really look like in practice? And I know that both of you have been at organizations where, people may have resisted some change, whether it's, changing insurance benefits, changing a new way you're doing performance appraisals, or even making a big business pivot and change selling different types of services or solutions to the market, right? And so when you think about giving the listeners and the participants in this roundtable today some actual action kind of items, like what does it look like in practice to actually start to slow down before you can speed up? And perhaps you both could give some real world examples of what you've seen work with inside your organizations, right? So Craig, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, it's me too, like everybody, working through this, thinking through this, but I'm thinking about it a lot and working with organizations and feeling it firsthand. I mean, that is the work I do, helping organizations and helping them. What I've always done, at least for the last well over 10 years, is helping them listen, right? Helping organizations listen. And that really took shape in those years at Culture Amp. And it was bigger than just an employee engagement survey. It was really working with organizations to help them think through, why are you doing this? How are you doing this? And don't miss different points along the way and do it well, to both build trust with your people and to get information to your leaders. However, there's a framework that developed for me in that journey, which I worked all these years working with organizations around this idea of, how do we collect good information first? That's the first stage. How do we take a pause and understand what we've collected, make sense of that? Because oftentimes when we get a lot of information in, it needs to be a moment to ask some questions, poke holes. Why? What do we think about this? And then finally decide on what action. Methodically think about on that journey what action, and then repeat. How did that work? The reason I'm sharing that is I think there's something really big in there that I didn't think about it this way before. It was just like, oh, we're running an employee listening program, but it was that middle piece. I think humans naturally moving around the world are collecting lots of information at all the time, but particularly under anxiety, we go straight to action.
Hmm.
Nervous. So we move, and Brene Brown talks about this, right? This the
Mhm.
beauty is in the pause, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of behavioral like research around this idea of we taking information in, taking the moment between taking it in and taking action is a very powerful moment to make sense of it. If we react too quickly, oftentimes we can make poor judgments. We're acting off just pure emotion, which those are just chemicals flowing through us, and we don't make our best decisions. So the reason I'm sharing that, I think it ties into the theme. It's a little bit of that slow down piece, and to remind everybody. I know right now it feels like you can't possibly move fast enough, and the world's just saying you're not moving fast enough. You're not doing enough. You're looking and seeing anything you need to see to tell you you're not doing that, while really everybody is phonetically kind of moving around. And so I would encourage. I think the biggest thing is that understand phase, and that doesn't mean you're stopping. It's a very important phase, because when the less we do that, then what we do is we make poor decisions, and then we go back to data in, poor decision, data in, poor decision, and it kind of snowballs into making a lot of mistakes, carrying that debt with our people, with our organizations. So how do you build in, the military does it, EMTs do it, high stress environments do it. How do you build in a methodical way to get information, to pause it and make sense of that information so you make solid decisions? And if you're listening to this and you feel like, as I'm saying, that your organization is very reflexive and reactionary, we need to get to a more responsiveness. And I think that's that middle piece of understanding. And I think that's also the place where we have to frame it and say that's an important part of the process. And that doesn't mean we're stopping. It means we're just stopping to make sense. And right now, I guarantee you we're gonna see a lot of money spent on a lot of things with a lot, and we're already seeing it. And the results are not showing given the dollars that are invested. And I don't think that means there's a problem with the technology. I think we're all just moving so fast that we're not being methodical about it right now. So if there's a framework, that would be it. Slowing down, saying, are we reactionary, or are we responsive, and how do we become more responsive? And if you think that's not possible, we were talking about this prior. If you talked about the military, if you talked about a hospital environment, this has been baked into high stress environments for a long time. I just think
Hmm.
the rest of the world now, places where it used to be pretty stable, aren't. We have to build that into our processes as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And you're right. We can learn a lot from, first frontline workers that are in those situations. I remember I was a lifeguard when I was a kid growing up, and to be a lifeguard, you had to go through, you had to be just know how to swim. So learning the basics, right? And then you had to go through a lot of different scenarios and practice and practice and practice. And so I think that's and be allowed to fail and learn from your failings, right? And what
Mhm.
about you, Gianna? What would you
Yeah.
say you've seen in organizations or can shed light on to what's worked before?
Yeah, well, so much of what Craig shared really resonates, from firsthand experience, from observed experiences and others. And I think, Craig, I love that you quoted and mentioned Brene Brown. I'm a huge fan of hers, and the way that she phrases that, I think, is between stimulus and response. Is that pause, and that pause is where the magic is. Because you're right. I think as humans, especially when we're under stress or we're feeling anxious or when we feel pressured, we default to, okay, I got to act, I got a solution, I got to like move and move fast. When actually we'd be better served to take a breather, to pause and understand, then to act. So the example that comes to mind is I worked in an organization once where we knew for the sales team, we needed to revamp our commission plans. It was something we had communicated about in all hands meetings and something that we were really eager to make sure we were on top of, and to make sure that folks were recognized for their work. We had accelerators in the early part of the year when we wanted to drive business. We had spiffs, like all of that probably is going to resonate with a lot of the listeners. We were also mindful that we wanted to get the commission plans out in front of the commission carrying folks and have the signed signatures back because, tick tock, tick tock, you've got a timeline and you want to make sure your commission carrying folks know how they're being comped as they're out there, doing the deals. So it was go, 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 go. We've got this timeline. And we as a leadership team felt like, okay, like minimum viable products, get this out there. And then if there are tweaks or changes needed, we'll do that. We'll fail fast, iterate quickly, et cetera. But what we started to realize, though, through some of the HR business partner feedback, as well as just our employees being very vocal with us, was hold on a second. They were not ready for this change to their commission plan. They felt like change was happening to them, not change
Mm,
happening with them. And so we as a leadership team said, oh, well, hold on a second. If the very plan and the very thing that's meant to incentivize and reward our sales team is actually creating thrash and friction for them, maybe, and we actually used the words at the time, maybe we need to slow down to speed up in order for this to be effective. And so what we did is in a sales only, like commission carrying only, all hands, we acknowledged the problem and we said, we've been so focused on getting this out before the start of the new fiscal year that we realize we haven't taken enough time to make sure this is socialized and that your feedback is incorporated in all of the terms and conditions and the details of a commission plan. And so to that end, we're going to take your existing commission plan and extend that into at least one, if not 2 months into the new fiscal year. So like that's you all are clear on that. That's what and that's going to buy us some time. And then what we're
hmm
going to do is we're going to do a series of roundtable discussions and conversations and really understand from you what resonates with the current plan and what are the needs that are unfilled by the current plan. What are the things that you think you should be comped on that you're not right now? Or, like so we approached it from that standpoint, keeping in mind what we want to do is have commission plans that work for everybody. That work for you, but keep in mind, like, yes, everyone wants $1 trillion. Of course you do, but it's got to work for us as a business too. And slowing down a little bit and allowing room and space for conversation and dialogue created the buy-in that was needed for them to then say, okay, they felt like they were part of the solution. And we actually did make tweaks and modifications to the ultimate commission plan that went out. So that's when we talk about slowing down to speed up, that's the example that comes to mind.
That's
You know,
awesome. Can I jump in and just
yeah,
first of
absolutely,
all, I
Craig.
love that. I love that story. So practical, and it had me reflect on another story that I think is probably really good in this moment as well. Um, But what Gian, and also it was slow down to speed up, but also the building trust and bringing your people along, right? And
Yep.
then I think as
Yep.
long as I do this often, the triangle, our organizations are shaped like this right now. So we have centralized leadership at the top making decisions. So I have empathy for that. Like that's how it's designed. But
Yep.
there are missteps that can happen if we're not paying attention. So I work with an organization. It's a construction organization. They're growing. They haven't historically had employee listing or performance management. So as part of the journey in the very beginning, we are helping bring that all on for them. But we did a very small listening initiative. We picked 10 people, we surveyed them, we listened to them. To go back to the leadership team as we set this up, we learned a lot in that and things that I knew we'd probably learn in a survey. One was that the people were wanting more response on their performance management, right? The leadership team very quickly wanted to move. Well, let's start doing that. And I knew we were planning to do a larger employee listing program. So my advice was hold off. Let's do the employee listing program and then go back with the same thing you're going to share. I know you're probably right. I know we're probably going to see it, which we did. We saw that in the large listing program. But I just go back to the idea of if they would have gone and said, "We're doing this thing, and we're initiating a performance management program,"
Hmm.
how the employees may have responded, feeling a little out of control or weren't part of it, versus saying the same thing after they heard everybody same that we heard and said we heard you, here's what we're going to do. Now I didn't A/B test it, so I don't ever know what would happen if they rushed, but I do believe that that could have been a misstep or would have been at least a liability, where simply pausing and just thinking about the bigger picture, that if you have buy-in from your people, if they feel like, oh, you listened to all of us and came back with this. And I share
Hmm.
that now because I think there's something to take about that with AI as well. There's things we may know that we're seeing,
I
but
agree.
are we pushing it into our organizations and really
Yep.
forcing it down people's throats in our organization? Are we, even if we know that's the case, pausing and tying it back to something we've heard from them and saying, we heard you, here's what we're going to do. So it's simply being thoughtful, again, anxiety, moving fast, and then misstepping and dealing with frustrated people who don't feel like their voice is being heard and they're being, we have to understand people in this. No matter how good the technology is, it's humans that need to ingest and use and adapt and change. So don't miss that moment just because we're so fixated on the new technology, that we are still dealing with people at this moment in time. And as long as we're dealing with people, we have to bring that into the equation. And how are we helping with the buy-in? Because that friction will be heavy. No
Yeah.
matter how good the technology is, if people aren't bought in, you are going to be on a treadmill with like you're working up on an uphill battle with a lot of resistance. And I'm always working, how do we minimize that in our organization? So we're getting to the same place with a lot less friction, with a lot less resistance.
Yeah, and I think you both gave great examples of the listening and then using that data to inform the next steps of what you're going to take action on, which is incredibly important. I have two little side notes of how we've seen some of our customers, and we also work with companies to do AI literacy training. One of the first steps in that process is to send out of where is everybody now? I would say almost every single company we've worked with, the employees say people have said to go do AI, but there's no structure around it, right? There's no structure of how that's all going to really come together. We don't
Hmm.
have a roadmap at all in front of us, and it's very vague and ambiguous, which creates that fear factor, lack of trust, and understanding of what to do. Some of our customers use our pulse. We have a pulse survey feature within our product so that they can do those quick moment ones because, like you mentioned, Craig, sometimes to do more of the extensive employee listening survey, usually you have to kind of queue that up, but there's no reason people can't do, the micro surveying of people in ways that really matter and help people, pull people along in this journey because it is a journey. It's going to be a process for everyone, right?
Whatever your strategy is and whatever tools you're using, there's one fun look. When I worked back at Achievers doing recognition and rewards, one thing that stuck with me and is always, if I lay it on any of the work I've done, is fundamentally people want to feel seen and heard. Period. The pulse, the big survey, the conversations. I mean, there's the nuance of how to do it well, but people want to be seen and heard, and that doesn't. They want to feel seen and heard even now as we're going through this transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then, in moving forward in the conversation to, talk about that, this, kind of topic I just sort of brought up is this literacy gap, right? We're seeing organizations just jump right into the go do AI and here's,
Yeah.
strategy being talked about from the top, yet people, don't have as much of an understanding or a literacy of around the change itself. What do you think leaders keep skip? Why do you think leaders keep skipping that step? And maybe you can give some examples, or maybe you don't see leaders skipping that step. Is just kind of a kind of pro and con type of side. But I think that the listening that I've done on just the community I'm exposed to, it feels like there's not a lot of you know the leadership listening that people need a little bit more, right? Why do you think they're skipping this step today?
I think
Um,
sometimes, I mean, as a leader, right, a person is likely a leader because they're able to assess situations relatively quickly, come up with, a point of view, and then go do it. So speed is something in our society that we have rewarded, and that often leads to leadership. And consequently, I think so many leaders have a bit of a bias for action that you want to show results, you want to get out there. And in a world that is quickly changing, that's dynamic, a la AI, there is that pressure in some ways, if you're a leader, to go, and to iterate and to do the thing. Um, I do think the literacy before strategy piece, though, is essential to making sure whatever change we are implementing or wanting to come about is truly successful and sticks. Otherwise, if we skip the literacy piece, I think we could have performative compliance to using AI or to, whatever it is, but people are never actually going to be bought in and adopting and truly integrating the AI or the strategy that we want to happen. I had this recently actually on my team where I'm a big believer in AI. I think that it's an enabler of allowing humans to do what humans do best. And it removes a lot of, administrative burden, right? Like all of that type of stuff. But not everyone on the team has that same understanding. We've got different folks who are at different places in that AI proficiency and AI curiosity journey. And so my initial reaction as I was thinking about some things, some tools, AI tools that could help us on the talent acquisition side of the house was, okay, well, let's go do this, right? We'll train the team on it, and like, we'll go and we'll start to see ROI and time saved and da 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 da. And then I took a moment to pause and to listen to what my leadership team, as well as those who are not my direct reports, were saying. And what I heard them say was, we know we need to become even more AI proficient. However, we've got a lot of questions. We're unsure exactly what that looks like and really unsure what that looks like for me. What we
mhm.
did as a talent acquisition team, we slowed down and we said, okay, talk to me about dream state. What are the things that you love doing and what are the things that you're not super excited about doing? Got the list of various different things. And I said, okay, what if there were some tools out there that could help with that stuff, the stuff that you don't actually enjoy doing, so that you could then have more time to do these other things that you do enjoy doing? They were open. So then what we did is, this is over the course of, multiple weeks, not one conversation. I had two vendors come in that offer solutions that are AI enabled first round. Instead of a recruiter screen, it's an AI bot that does the first round of recruiter screens. And they sat with the team and did demos. So the team could ask questions, they could see, they could also understand how, oh yeah, that stuff that I don't like doing, sifting through all these different resumes and scheduling, screens and, having takeaway notes and, all of that stuff. Oh wow, this is going to enable me to spend my time speaking with candidates that are more likely to have the skills and capabilities that we're looking for. And so right now what we have is I said, okay, great. We're not going to make a decision off of this. Let's do some pilots. And so literally right now we've got some, a couple pilots going on. And that's where slowing down a little bit instead of just doing, like we could have signed a contract and been off to the races. And, the team would have probably, begrudgingly like performed and done the thing. But I think it's going to be a lot more successful having not even their buy-in, but their excitement around, oh,
Right.
wow, like this is actually something that I see can really help me be more effective in what I do. And so that's where that literacy piece, has been really, really helpful. Again, we're in it right now, so it's too early for me to come back and say, okay, like here are all the takeaways, but we're in it and it seems to be going well and the feedback has been very positive. They feel like they're part of this solution as opposed to having to comply with a strategy.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's a great way to handle that scenario. And you've given, I think, the listeners and participants, some things tactically to take from that, that they can use themselves, because I know a lot of people feel a little helpless sometimes. So, and Craig, what about your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first, Gianna, I always loved working with you. I love
Same, Craig, same.
you always give me really great stuff to lead with, and that one of the things I do, I teach at Harvard Extension School in their organizational psychology program, and one of the courses that I'm part of is on motivation. And just to back up, I think reiterating what Gianna said, but with more of an academic, and we know this in any sort of coaching that there's tons of research, and we know for a fact that in any sort of coaching, we're trying to drive change. The more people feel like they came to the decision, the more successful it's going to be. So I think what Gianna just mentioned, what I talked about before of pushing things on people, the savvy leaders are going to understand how are we going to help people come, what Gianna said, slow down before she pushed it on them. Same outcome ultimately would have gotten there, but the journey to get there would have been so much harder versus helping them realize, oh, I want to do this because it's going to make my world better. Like humans need the agency. We need to believe that we're part of the process, or we're just going to resist and push back. So I think to double down and say, hoping more leaders. It's easy to come in with a hard hand and push, and you might get a short term, outcome. But what you're going to do is turnover. You're going to burn people out. Doing the next project's going to be harder. So be smart about this, even if you know where you need to go. I also want to, what Gianna said is that listening before the strategy. And I think in the model I said before, collect, understand, and act. The act there is strategy. So
Yeah.
collecting, understanding, and then designing a strategy, is really important where you're bringing all that information, not just going with a quick strategy, which brings me to what I wanted to share here. The idea, it's fun. Okay, so if anybody here has a background in any sort of behavioral science, which probably most people are going to watch this have heard this saying. I've been in audiences where they haven't, but the Drucker saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. For the longest time, I just didn't like it. I was just like, it just seems like a cliche kind of thing in our industry. And then one day I was at a conference, someone was talking about it, and it hit me the power of that statement. And what landed for me was you can have a okay strategy with a strong culture and your chances of success are very high. You can have a great strategy with a poor culture and the chances of your strategy succeeding are very low. And I think that's really important that, but we get fixated in our organizations on the strategy and missing
Mhm.
that the people need to execute on that strategy. And I think that's going to play really heavy into where we're going next. The example I have around that would be the community. I mentioned it early. It was the second half of 2019, we were building community with the idea we're going to launch in 2020. And we did. In January 2020, we launched our first pilots, and 2 months later, this thing that was supposed to be in person, we're setting up chapters around the globe, COVID hit. And I honestly believe that it all could have just fallen apart. It very likely could have in a lot of different teams. But we had this core team of 3 people, but we were so aligned and so tight that there's an example of that strategy had to go out the window. We had to adapt, and it went on to be very successful. And again, I didn't A/B test it. I don't know for sure, but my hunch is that 8 out of 10 would have flopped with the wrong team. That the ability to adapt, to not get stressed out about the fact that what we planned wasn't working, but said, well, how might we go forward? And how do we remember what we set out to do, but retool this thing without a lot of leadership helping us? Because this was COVID. They were dealing with a lot of other things than this one project that was happening on the side. So I just want to reiterate in this, and I think right now this always seems to happen when we get really stressed, and also it's not an employee market, it's an employer's market, that it's really easy to push your way through, but you're building resistance and a lot of challenge, and to work with people and remember the way we work is going to dictate how successful we're going to be on what we're setting out to do. So as we move through this, the technology is the bright shiny thing. I get it. When believe me, it blows my mind, and I know we're going there. But the best organizations are going to be the ones that really work with their people to adapt and bring that in, even when they know what the outcome needs to be and they know the right tool. Can you get your
Yeah.
people to help with the buy-in? And if we feel like we played a role in building something, we're more apt to support that thing. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, that's great advice too. And I think having all these good success stories of things that have happened and worked well are wonderful for takeaways. But I think we're at a time now where AI, frankly, and usage of AI and even just everything we do, we have failures. And the idea of failing is not, I mean, sometimes I cringe at the word failure because it's not really failure. It's you tried. You learned, and now you need to iterate and try again, right?
Adaptation,
So,
which we need right now.
yeah, absolutely. We need that. So, if you guys don't mind being a little vulnerable here and just sharing, a time where something didn't work out that well, where you were working with your senior leaders and, you were trying to, again, handle a change management situation, and maybe you could point to a few times that, or a certain circumstance that didn't go so well. And what did you learn from it that you took into the next iteration of an activity or initiative you directed? I hope I'm not catching you too far off guard here. I mean, we all have
Well,
failures.
John, if you want a
Yeah,
second, one
yeah,
part.
that's okay,
No,
Gianna. I
that's
don't know if you
fine.
have something
Look,
in
3 years ago, I set out to do something that I'd never done before, and that was to start my own business. So I know this is not, I'm sure if I dug deep, I could find stories about inside organizations as well, but I think it's very personal of anybody that's done this in this journey. I think the journey is about failing. The failing is
hmm
the point, and it's some of the best decisions and the biggest moments came when my back was against a wall, where the path I was trying, what I thought, there's a lot of things I thought about what it was going to be like to run a business that have turned out not be the case, or what does sales really look like and marketing really look like, with only 2 month runway left, and having to be creative, and maybe that thing that I was focused on is not the thing. I think I've always used this term of like embrace the suck, that's kind of embrace it, be with that, especially if we're building or adapting or changing, right? There are times where we're playing the playbook. We did that for many years, leading up to COVID, that there was a playbook for the most part, and it was like, who has the playbook to help me? But we're in this place where there's no playbook. So embracing that, I can just tell you that there's been a lot of successes in the past 3 years building a business, and there's been a lot of hard moments, and coming to terms with the fact that what I was trying wasn't working and it wasn't getting the outcomes,
Mm.
literally down to the point of how am I going to pay my bills and feed my family. But those also were the moments, if I stayed open and didn't crumble in the face of that, that I made some of the best decisions and made new decisions, and like, okay, I need to start marketing differently. I need to start working with organizations differently, or finding a new product to offer. So I think it's really, I just hope that everybody doesn't beat themselves up and say, this is right now, it's part of the game, that kids do this all the time. They play, they fail, they learn, they adapt. They play, they fail, they learn, they adapt. Like this story, I even hate, is just a word. It doesn't really encompass what we're talking about. This is the learning process. It's the iterative process. So how do we? I think when we repeat mistakes, there's a problem. I think if we learn from mistakes in our organizations and we look back and say we embrace initial failures as a way to learn, we need those. But are we doing it? Are we iterating quickly? Right? Collect, understand, act, repeat, repeat, repeat. Like learn, repeat, keep
Right.
iterating. There's no endpoint. You're not solving any one thing. It's just around adaptability and transformation.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. And thanks for sharing your story, Craig. You're doing awesome. So hang in there. It is a journey. And what about you, Gianna?
Well, I just want to plus one to what you just said right now, Beth. Like, Craig, I so appreciate you, and I so appreciate just the authenticity with which you answered, the question about failure, because that's a like you went to a deep place, and I just want to honor that, as someone that I have so much respect for. And I see you out in the world, and I know that behind all of that are failures, right? In order to truly be great, we all have a little bit of that broken road that we've traveled and learned from, that I actually think is necessary to achieve greatness. Um, and if I think about where we are, kind of making it back to or taking it back to AI, I do think some of like the stumbling that we're, as a society doing with AI, the misfires, the mistakes, like all of that stuff. I think that's part of this learning journey and path that we're all in together. And we have to do that to get out together on the other side. And we know that we're going somewhere on the other side. And Beth, to answer your question around, a failure, I can think of so many of them. And I can think of examples like rolling out a benefit strategy that the organization wasn't quite ready for, and focusing a lot on student loan repayment plans when actually our workforce wasn't really wanting that at the time. They wanted lower premiums for themselves and their dependents on health, medical, dental, vision type stuff. So I can think of a lot of different examples, but perhaps what might be more useful is when failure happens, because that is inevitable no matter what we're doing. I think what's important is how we handle that failure. So it's not the absence of failure that should be the metric of success. It's what we do when failure happens. And if I think about this benefits example, what we did is during the next cycle right before open enrollment, where we talked to employees about benefits, we said, we thought this was important to you, and that's why we offered it. However, upon further review and with more information, we realized we got that wrong. We thought that this was something that you really wanted, and a very small subset of you actually seemed to want that and pay for it. And so we're going to try something else, right? And so we, removed that benefit, and we had some other, things that we offered. And for employees that wanted the student loan repayment stuff, they could opt in as a kind of a separate, program over here. But the point of that is we work in human organizations. Employees are human beings. And pausing for a minute and saying, okay, here's what we did, and we stumbled. It wasn't quite what we thought. And so here's what we're going to do about it now. We're going to try something else. When we show up vulnerable and real with people, I found time and time again, never underestimate the resiliency of humans. And our employees responded in kind. They felt like, wow, cool, great, and that's wonderful. Thank you for taking our feedback, and let's try some of these new benefits. So when mistakes
Awesome.
happen, don't hide, lean into them, be upfront, and try something else.
I love it because that is really great because again, everybody is going through this iterative cycle of learning, failing, trying again that we have right now. So I know I'm looking at the clock. We have about 5 minutes left. So I could talk to you both for hours, I'm sure. So, but if we had to leave this conversation with like one piece of advice, you would be giving people who are participants, listeners to this session, they came here probably with that things are happening too fast at my organization. What do I do about it? They may be middle management. They may be somebody who feels like I don't have a voice. I'm too junior within the organization. But what can these people do in order to, help, surface that maybe there is a need to stop and listen and provide more data, et cetera, before you just leapfrog ahead through all these experiments that don't have a lot of direction or goals or guidance, right? Um, I think people are always looking for smart folks like yourselves to shed light on that. So, Gianna, since you're already on camera right now, do you
Sure.
want to go ahead and share your words of wisdom?
Yeah, well, if you're in the session and you're thinking, okay, I want to slow down to speed up, but what do I do? Um, what I would recommend is pause for a minute, approach from a place of curiosity, not solutioning, because part of how you solution is by being curious, and ask your teams, ask others in the organization, and get that information, integrate that, and then start making moves to act. And remember, act can be small steps, right? We take one bite, we metabolize, we ingest, we check in with people, okay, and then we do the next, and then we do, so this doesn't have to be an overnight process. It is a journey, and creating space to have oxygen come in and replenish so that we can take the next step together and have it feel good and have everyone bought in is ultimately what's going to help us be successful with that new AI tool or AI initiative or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great advice. Oop, I'm so sorry. That was my little alarm here. And Craig, what about yourself?
Yeah, look, I know, and we on this call we've really tried to give tips and direct things. I think sometimes we want that, but this is behavioral. There's not one thing we're going to say do. This is about a way of being. So I think there's just a couple analogies that at least resonate with me and have helped me along the way. One is this came from Diana Chapman, who's one of the founders of Conscious Leadership Group, who's somebody I've done work with years ago, and I was going through some challenging transition times for myself. And her advice was no rush, no pause. And that's always stuck with me. And I think it's just a good one to hold in our minds of like when we get anxious, we want so fast to solve it, end it, end it. And we can make poor decisions versus the at least the mantra for me is sometimes in situations, no rush, no pause. Even building the business, right? Keep moving. It doesn't have to, you don't have to sprint, but keep moving. And I
Mhm.
think it's a good mantra in the world. No rush, no pause. You know, that
Mm.
patience is important. The second one came from, I did that panel I mentioned before at Human Tech Week, and Larry Green was on the panel. Larry
Oh,
is
love him.
a senior leader at Google around
Yeah.
wellness programs. His background, he was a D1 basketball player. He played for the Naval Academy. Just an amazing background, and that was the idea. The whole thing was around performance, and the idea was we can't outrun our nervous system. So no matter what, that's a limiter. Our organizational nervous system, our human nervous system. But he talked about playing basketball and how easy, it's particularly highly competitive level basketball. Speaking of watching these amazing games lately, that the two teams not only playing the game but the pace of the game, and that it can get out of control, and the other team can kind of almost get you into their pace, and that the art is when you're on offense is to slow down and control the pace. That when you get the ball, you have this opportunity, like, and it's an art of the team to manage the pace themselves and not let the outside world, the opponent, dictate your pace. So that was a big thing that came up when we decided to even have this conversation. That was sitting with me, but I thought that was such a great analogy to use a sports analogy. But on the basket, that we are not just victims to what's happening outside of us. We have some control also on our pacing, but we can, like that basketball team, get caught up in the mayhem and really be burning our energy and burning our efforts and getting worn down because their team is dictating our pace. So for all of our organizations and leaders listening to this, ask yourself, how are we controlling, dictating the pace, or is it being dictated for us? I think so that no rush, no pause, and are we taking ownership of the pace ourselves and making sure that we are being methodical, not just exhausting ourselves and burning out the organization and the individuals involved.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that, especially in light of the big game 5 of the series that's coming up. So when everyone is glued to their TV trying to figure out Knicks or Spurs, you can start to think about that analogy that Craig just shared. So, well, thank you both for being here today. I know we're at the end of our time. We're going to have, for the audience, we're going to have this recording published on our website, and we'll be sharing out a link to those who registered as well. Again, thanks everyone. Hopefully, you have some good words of wisdom to move forward into your summertime. All right. Thanks so much. And to Craig and
You.
Gianna, really appreciate you guys being here today. So
Likewise.
thank you.